So what is up, guys? Nick here, helping you to master your technology. iPhone 15 Pro Max versus Galaxy S23 Ultra 3 weeks later. So in this video, I'm going to explain to you everything you need to know, full comparison, everything I've experienced, and we're going to talk about which one is the better phone overall. Now, putting biases aside, whichever platform you like, you're probably going to go with anyway, but we're going to be breaking down hardware and talking about these phone software as well. Starting with the price points, which was the better value? Which one do I feel was the better value? So Apple kind of upped their price point, and giving you 256 gig storage. That's kind of similar to the price point of the S23 Ultra, which is slightly more at the starting price, but they usually throw in discounts, so most people will never pay more for a Galaxy S23 Ultra. Also, there's a lot of carrier incentives and deals that are usually thrown in, and places like Best Buy also throw in some deals. So usually nobody pays as much for an S23 Ultra as they do for an iPhone 14 Pro Max or 15 Pro Max. So the iPhone is not the better value here in terms of the price. That's going to be the Samsung. Okay, so 3 weeks later, what do I feel like with the body and design? Well, I can tell you right away, right off the bat, because of the titanium edges, the more balanced, lightweight, I do think the iPhone 15 Pro Max is more comfortable to hold, hands down, over the S23 Ultra. This is the phone I want to hold in my hand more, mostly because the rounded corners, the flat display, it's just more enjoyable to hold this phone day to day than the S23 Ultra, which to me is just the shape of it. It just doesn't feel as good in the hand, in my opinion, in terms of, these corners right here. They do have nice dip on the back of the glass here, and on the front is curved display. So it's not horrible, and the weight is very well balanced. But the rectangular design for me, right there, you see that corner just digging there. It just feels a little bit huge day to day to use this phone. But, at the same time, if you are using S Pen and you are using this phone for, heavy media consumption, it's worth the trade-off. I think it's worth that trade-off if you're going to be power using this product. It's definitely worth that trade-off of a slightly less comfortable design. But I do think Samsung's going to go to a different design on the S24 Ultra. We'll have to see. And in terms of the weight, the iPhone is definitely much lighter, 13 grams. However, because Samsung already was doing really well at making their larger phones not super heavy at 234 grams versus 221, the Samsung S23 Ultra definitely feels pretty well balanced as well. So it doesn't feel massively heavy, but both of these phones here, when you put cases on them, they're still not light phones. These are not iPhone 15s. These are not regular Galaxy S23s. These are some big boys, and you're definitely going to feel them. But the iPhone has a much lighter feel than its prior edition, whereas the S23 Ultra, S22 Ultra, these phones already weren't the heaviest compared to like the 14 Pro Max, 13 Pro Max. Build quality wise, I do like the new titanium on the iPhone 15 Pro Max, although the aluminum here is pretty good. I think Samsung's going to go to titanium as well. That's the rumors we're seeing. The aluminum's still clean, especially on this Samsung exclusive color. You don't get smudges or nothing like that. Both of them feel pretty similar though in terms of premium, but the titanium's a cool new touch. It's just different, so I've been liking that a little bit more. But the aluminum feels sturdy and strong. Everything about this phone's build just feels like a tank on the Galaxy S23 Ultra, so really like that. Both of them do have a matte textured back glass, so you're not going to feel too much of a difference there. Overall, both of these phones just feel super premium. They feel exactly like what you paid for them, like they're top of the line. And so 3 weeks later, I don't really feel like one is way better than the other, no matter which I'm using. Okay, so the displays. Well, the iPhone got thinner bezels than ever before. And if you look down here, it looks like the Samsung has more of a chin down here, but I wouldn't really call this a chin. It's just the bezel is a little bit thicker than the iPhone 15 Pro Max. On the edges, Samsung already had incredibly thin bezels because it spills over the edge. So overall, I feel like the iPhone is just catching up to the Samsung in terms of bezels. Now up here, you'll see we have punch hole display, dynamic island. I much prefer the punch hole. It's easier to hide within software, and when you are watching video, it doesn't get in the way as much. than Dynamic Island. And while Apple is taking advantage of Dynamic Island with feature sets such as, calls, music, timers, Uber Eats, all kinds of stuff, flashlight, airdrop features, like there's a lot of things it does. I really think that's a cover because the technology is not ready for a full screen under display camera. That's what I think it is. It's something to distract you from the fact that they just can't get the camera underneath the display just yet with the quality that they probably want. Because I'm pretty sure people would love a full screen iPhone with a camera underneath display as long as the quality could remain the same. And if it can't, if they could find a way to jam it into the bezel, but at this thin of a level of a bezel, I don't see that happening. You'll see right here, though, that Samsung doesn't really have any features taking advantage of the punch hole. So, there is a cool factor to Dynamic Island that the Samsung doesn't have. So that's the benefit. But when it comes to the pure media consumption and the display experience, I do think that Samsung is winning out here. It still has a more vibrant panel as well. Samsung still has that lead over Apple, even though it's been all these years. But if you go to display, you can really tone it down as well. You can put it in vivid or natural. And let me know, what are you, team natural? Do you like a natural display like the iPhone, or natural here in the Samsung? Or you like a more vivid, punchy display? And you still have white balance features and stuff like that. But the real big difference too is that while Apple takes advantage of the Dynamic Island, they don't take advantage of the size. Samsung takes advantage of the size by giving you plenty of split screen options, and you can kind of flip these around as well. Just click right here. Let's click on these three dots. Hold on, let me get the app in there first before I start talking. And then you can flip them around. You could drag them down. You can also bring in another application for the pop view. So that's pretty cool as well. Sliding around over here, you can bring in a pop view application. So a lot of ways to take advantage of the display. And surprisingly, this is still super annoying that Apple doesn't have this anymore like they used to have on the Plus. You can still put the Samsung in this display mode, which is landscape, and we can't do that on my 15 Pro Max. I really dislike this, and this is starting to aggravate me because I'm paying Apple like $1,000+ for these phones, and they're still not throwing these basic features that would make the experience so much better. You don't have to tweak your software that much. You just have to throw in a landscape mode. Like, come on. Like, I know everybody uses their phone in portrait for the majority of the day, but sometimes I want it in landscape because at nighttime, I'm watching videos. I want to, feel like I got a little mini tablet in my hand. Also, I want to do some split screen because it's not like we need it all the time. I know multitasking is not as simplistic as maybe some of the, goals of, the minimalist iPhone experience. But, at the same time, the split screen is very, very useful in certain situations. Like if you are calculating something and you need to, pay a bill or something, you could split that screen, calculate that bill, calculate some financial stuff. Or even if you're not doing that, if you're messaging somebody, you need to show them a picture, you don't got to hop in between, hold that image and then bring it into messages. You could actually you would be able to just drag it down. Like, it's going to be amazing when they hit split screen finally on the iPhone, but it's still not here yet. And for that reason, the display experience, I think, is still better on the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra. And because it's got more of a TV type shape, you have a better video watching experience as well. Although the iPhone is pretty good until you start pinching in on the content, then we have a little bit of an issue. For example, like this. Let's go ahead and put in landscape like this right here. If you're pinching in, you'll definitely have Dynamic Island dragging in there. So overall, very good displays on both. The iPhone also gets very, very bright. Hits 2000 nits. This one hits pretty darn close, and outdoors, neither is an issue. I like how Samsung's adaptive brightness is right here in the quick panel where you have to go into accessibility for this one. And you can tweak. This is another thing I like about Samsung. You could tweak it to an extra brightness mode, which basically means you can use the full level of brightness whenever you want. And so display experience, more customizable, more usage of it here. Both have like a true tone, eye comfort shield type mode. They both have dark modes. It just comes down to, do you want more of a basic premium display? That's the iPhone. Or do you want a display that's top of the line that uses it really well, that uses that screen space really well? That's the Samsung. And so let's talk about the software differences and what I think about these. several weeks later. I'm not going to dive too deep into this because at this point, I feel like I've been saying this for years. It's more customization. It's more theming options. It's just much more features on the Samsung that you're going to play around with. I do think the Samsung is a little more fun to use with the advanced features, S Pen features, customization, you know, just kind of having every feature you could think of. I think Apple has the widgets with the app library. It's very minimal, very clean, but I do think that it gets kind of boring if you're looking for entertainment, if you're like to enjoy like having fun with your phone. And I'm not saying that the Samsung is not simple and clean too. It can be simple and clean if you just use it in that fashion. But when you want to start digging around, when you do get that little itch to do something on your phone a little fun, the iPhone is just very simple and it doesn't really offer that. So I do think it's really great for people who are just not into, you know, messing around with their phone like that. It's just a tool for them. It's excellent for that. It's probably the best phone out there. In terms of software, if you're looking for a little bit more fun, I would definitely say the Samsung has that. I do think the Apple iPhone software looks cleaner, but I'll have to cover One UI 6 to see if that improves things for the Samsung. And I do think the animations are still smoother on the iPhone, at least with the One UI 5. I'll have to try One UI 6 to see if that changes. But 3 weeks later, it's pretty much like last year. More customization over here, longer software support over here, a little more fun to use over here, more features that are usable over here. And this phone, while it has a ton of features, it's just very simple and minimal with a lot of software updates. These still come in slower, but still more regularly than Samsung of the past. Okay, so from a performance perspective, I do have to tell you that the iPhone from a benchmark perspective, if you can get better scores, and technically it has a faster chip. But in the real world, the Samsung you've seen in my speed tests actually launches apps quicker. It feels snappier. It's mostly down to the animations. While not smoother looking, it is faster feeling day to day, and they both have the 120 hertz. Apple combines a level of speed and smooth though that's pretty much unmatched. So I can't wait to try these out when I get the full official version of One UI 6 on this. I'll do another speed test. But the Samsung is definitely the more snappy phone. It also has better heat management, so you can play games longer without throttling on the Samsung, a little bit longer. So definitely better there. But technically speaking, the performance is stronger on the iPhone. It's just doesn't seem like it can use it as much, especially if it gets too warm, because I've seen in 3D Mark, I get higher scores when I'm not, you know, running a bunch of stuff. And so the phone needs to be cool to run its top performance. Samsung just really knocked it out of the park this year. I'm just more impressed with them because Apple's been doing great performance, but the fact that a Samsung could even feel faster than an iPhone is just something you wouldn't think of years ago. So for me, Samsung faster performance with the iPhone, the technically better performance in things like benchmarks. And if you really push it in things like iMovie or, you know, LumaFusion, you might get a faster render here and there, but they're pretty much evenly matched in the real world. Neither of them are really going to let you down. There's not much really to compare in the area of a stylus because only one has it, and that's Samsung. And I'm not going to go through every single feature, but you do have the ability to create notes with a pen, and you do have the ability to cut things out and just do things that are just not possible on the iPhone. Even if you don't want to use your finger, the ability to use a pen to go through this phone, it really sets it apart from that device. It gives it an extra bonus feature, and even from like the Pixel 8 Pro or any other phone out there, I mean, S Pen just sets this phone apart. It has an extra feature you just can't get on those devices. I know a lot of people say, I would never use that thing. You say that until you actually have an S23 Ultra, and then you find yourself using it once in a while, maybe even if you just use it to hover through pages and swipe through the phone. It's just fun to use sometimes. So there's an S Pen advantage for the Samsung, making it a better pick if you're into stylus usage. So when it comes to storage, Samsung no longer can claim they have micro SD card support, so you can't really expand it like you used to, which is super lame. But at the same time, you know, these storage offerings, usually they'll match a 512 gig phone for a 256 gig phone at the same price, you know, as a 256. So they'll be doing these deals on the Samsung, whereas you're always going to pay more for more storage on the iPhone. So the storage value is better on the Samsung. It also has faster USB-C transfer, versus this one over here, but they both have USB-C, which is nice. Just storage and RAM, 8 gigs of RAM. This one has 12 gigs of RAM, so 4 gig RAM more. And the way these operating systems use that RAM is a little bit different. I don't think Apple really needs 8 gigs of RAM, but having it is great. This one right here definitely takes advantage of its RAM with all its multitasking beast features. It's like a little computer in your pocket. You can plug this thing into DeX and make this thing a little computer. So more RAM, more storage for cheaper. I think Samsung wins there as well. I just got to be real with you. So let's talk about the cameras. Well, which one looks better, first of all? Well, I don't think either. I think this looks like a traffic light, and I think this looks like a stovetop. Either way, though, you know, the iPhone and the Samsung, they both stick off the body a little bit, but the iPhone seems to come out a little bit more. Which actually has the better camera? Well, let's take a look, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I'm not going to go on too much because there's not major things to talk about here. It's pretty simple, actually. Samsung has more zoom than Apple. Apple goes 5 times. This goes 10 times. They can literally only do 25 digital on the iPhone, whereas the Samsung can go 100 times. So Samsung is destroying them when it comes to zoom, even with their upgrades. You know, it's a lot more usable now. I think Apple has more zoom than ever, and having more zoom makes it less likely that a customer would really maybe even need 10 times zoom on the Samsung, but it still has the leg up in that. Video performance, I still prefer on the iPhone. I still think it looks better, but the video options on the Samsung is insane. Like, you have all these settings right here in camera, but you have portrait video modes, you have pro video modes, which is something you don't have on the iPhone, but you have cinematic, which is something you don't have on the Samsung. Portrait video is probably pretty similar in some ways, but a lot of features in the camera here for Samsung. You can definitely do things that are just not possible over here unless you download some apps. Apple's got this new feature where you can go ahead and, you know, take a picture of a person and do the portrait after the fact. Samsung already had that. Both of them do raw photos, but instead of me talking about these two, why don't we just take a look at some of the samples I took and you could decide for yourself. Personally, my take is that the Samsung has like a little bit sharpened, vibrant photo results when it's done, so they're very pleasing. Apple's got more of a clean, simple, warmer image that you might want to edit a little bit after if you want it to look exactly how you want it. But just take a look at both of these phones, samples, and decide for yourself which is for you. I would just pick the iPhone if you're really insane about video and clean imagery. I picked the Samsung if you like to post on social media right away. You don't want to edit stuff. You just want a vivid, punchy photo every time. And you want an insane zoom with a lot of camera features. That's how I would choose between these two. Take a look at my samples. And let's take it on to the area of battery life. Well, this one is tough because it depends on what you're doing with the phone. But I would say that the iPhone and the Samsung are neck and neck. I think depending on what I'm doing, the Samsung could actually last longer than this. And depending on what I'm doing, the iPhone could last longer than this. Is how I'm using the devices. But I can tell you both of them make it through a full day easily. But the Samsung has a technically larger cell, so it should win out in some areas. But the iPhone is really good at its efficiency. So I would say my experience 3 weeks later has been pretty much neck and neck with these. With depending on what I'm doing, this could die first, and depending on what I'm doing here, this could die first. And if it gets hot, the iPhone will die first. So they both have really good battery life. Charging speeds are faster still on the Samsung by a little bit, in my experience. The iPhone's not too bad either. Both of them are just really solid phones, and you want the big phone always if you want the battery life. Okay, so let's discuss the phone call quality. There's not much to discuss. They both have really good signal strength in 2023. We have really good 5G performance, better modems on the 15 Pro Max than they were on the 14 Pro Max, but Samsung is crushing it in this area always. Both of them have the latest Bluetooth standards, Wi-Fi standards. So these things are insane connectivity beasts. They're the best out there for sure. No issues on either. That's amazing this year. Audio is actually louder on the S23 Ultra, mostly because it has that Dolby Atmos mode. That's how you're going to enable this and get this thing to be even louder than the iPhone. But the iPhone is respectably loud. It's only about a decibel less loud than the Galaxy S23 Ultra. So in my experience, 3 weeks later, I would pick the S23 Ultra if you want louder audio, but I do think the iPhone sounds a little bit better. When it's at its highest volumes, it just sounds really crispy. So I like how this one sounds. I also like how this one sounds, but this one is just louder. So if you want a louder phone, you go over here to the Samsung. This is definitely the move. A couple other things before we wrap it up. Face ID. I really like the convenience of Face ID, but I also like the biometric sensor. It's also pretty amazing. So I like how they have a face unlock you can bypass, although it's not super secure. I would never use that if you're looking for the top security. They have good options there as well with these two phones. And another thing I wanted to mention is that you just don't get the same exact payment systems. You'll use Samsung Pay here versus Apple Pay. But here's the thing, Samsung Wallet and Samsung Pay is basically supported everywhere now that Apple Pay, well, not everywhere, but most places where Apple Pay is accepted, Samsung Pay is accepted. So you shouldn't have no payment issues either with either of these. One important safety feature though is Samsung doesn't have they have something similar, but they don't have the same emergency SOS via satellite features that the iPhone has. And we didn't go into iMessage versus messages. If you're into iMessage, there is no contest here. You're going to pick the iPhone 10 times every time. 10 out of 10 times you're picking the iPhone. So at the end of the day, which one is the better pick? These are super close. And I feel like Apple has a much better competitor now to the S23 Ultra than they did earlier this year with the 14 Pro Max. Although these phones don't launch at the same time, so people are probably like, why are you even comparing these, Nick? You should wait till the S24 Ultra. That's the actual competitor of the 15 Pro Max. Truth is, though, I think the S23 Ultra in many, many ways is still better than this phone. So Apple, to me, is seemingly falling behind. You know, I'm a little bit nervous for them when the S24 Ultra comes, because if this phone in multiple areas is already better than the just launched a few weeks ago iPhone, if I was Apple, I would be a little bit concerned about what's coming with the S24 Ultra. But I would still say most people are going to pick the iPhone if you are just into the Apple ecosystem. You love the build quality, you love the design, the brand. People are not picking this phone over here. That's just the bottom line. Regardless of how great it is, it doesn't matter. Now, if you're a Samsung fan or you like Android phones, you're probably not picking the iPhone. But it just depends on which brand you like, because at the end of the day, you have great options on either phone here. And that's what I love about 2023. Either way you go, you are winning. And that's the bottom line. So Samsung, great phone. iPhone, a great phone. There's no clear winner here. Clearly the hardware in some areas is better on the Samsung, and in some areas of software and things, you might have a better pick here. And keep in mind too, resale value, iPhone all day, mostly because of the brand, commands a larger resale value. Thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you haven't already, and stay tuned for more content. I'll catch you all in the next one. Nick here. Be sure to be well, and peace.